Public dialogue and civic engagement are important. They play a role in improving the health and well-being of Texans across our great state. That's why Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas is proud to support Texas Tribune events like the conversation you're about to see.
Please welcome him and all of our guests. Thank them for being here. Thank you all. It is really a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us today and to talk about a very important topic. I want to begin with a conversation about the President's executive order on immigration, which, as you know, is currently on hold. There's an appeal been made by the administration to see if we can move it forward, but for the moment it's on hold. The Texas Tribune, in partnership with the University of Texas, does polling. And today we released a series of poll findings in the area of immigration and found that 59% of Texans believe that all undocumented persons should be deported. Texans are obviously with those who believe the President's order is wrong. So, Senator Lucio, let me ask you first, as a veteran of these wars, somebody who's been thinking and talking about this issue for a long time, what should happen and will happen on the question of deportations?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is continue to urge Washington to fix a broken immigration system that they have failed to do for such a long time. That being said, we continue, especially in this legislative session, to address those international issues that come before us. I have filed a bill this morning on immigration, on the immigration crisis that took place here last summer. That was in response to that. My bill was. Obviously, I want to work very closely with our new Secretary of State, who has been appointed by the Governor Abbott, and I think that we can come up with some recommendations to our legislature how we address border security and how we hopefully keep that immigration crisis from happening again. But it has to be a state-federal type of partnership solution approach that has to take place. And I, for one, feel that we're nowhere close to understanding what is happening to those that come to our borders, and we need to have a very compassionate approach as well.
You support, Senator Lucio, do you support the President's executive order?
Well, yes, I think we need to take what's good out of that executive order, put it to use, and we ourselves in Texas need to voice our opinion, our recommendations from this point, and I think all of Texas needs to listen to us as well. Those that have grown up here from a very young age, for example, the Dreamers that were in Austin, Texas this last week, certainly have a reason to be there. They pledge allegiance to the flag of our country every day in our schools, to our Texas flag. They have been good citizens, even though they're still not true citizens as we know it. But the time they've lived here, they have been good neighbors, and they have put their kids through school, and now they find themselves ready to graduate and become part of American society, and they can be great contributors in our classroom.
And we want to encourage them.
I want that to happen.
Mr. Mayor, you are a supporter of Governor Abbott's. Governor Abbott does not agree with Senator Lucio that the President's executive order is the right thing. In fact, he was very proudly at the head of a line to sue the federal government once the executive order was announced, and he's been doing kind of a touchdown dance in the end zone since Judge Hannon's decision to halt the executive order last week. Are you with Senator Lucio, or are you with Governor Abbott on this?
Let me be very clear. I do not speak for Governor Abbott. He has his own state of mind. But
I want to know what you think.
That's exactly what I was going to tell you.
Yeah.
I believe the executive orders, most executive orders, are unnecessary. I think the way our Constitution's written, the way our government works, it is the rule of law that the Congress should be writing the laws. That's how you build a foundation built on concrete. If you have an executive order, the next president can come in and undo it. So you're basically creating a foundation in sand. So if you ask me what's better for the immigration process and the policies coming up, we need to get Congress to do their job. It's worked for over 200 years, and they got to put to task and make it work.
Right. Mr. Mayor, that's a process argument piece. I get that. But on the substance of it, we're talking about 3.7 million parents who are undocumented of citizens. We're talking about 300,000 children who are undocumented under the DACA rules who would be permitted to remain, not be deported. 5 million people in total would be affected by this. Leave the process question, the executive versus Congress aside. Substantively, do you believe the folks who would be impacted by this should in fact be deported?
No, they shouldn't be deported. The DACA kids, I talked to the Dreamers, I saw them too at the Capitol, and I explained to them that their job is not to leave the system as it is, because apparently there's a desire to change it. Maybe a modification might be a good thing. Let me give you a great example that I discussed with them.
Yes.
I told them that what if you implemented a policy within that structure to make a DACA student do community service work, volunteer work. I'm a big believer in volunteer work.
Yeah.
A hypothetical 1,000 hours by the time you graduate from college, you'll be a better student, you'll be a better community member, and you'll appreciate.
And then you can remain.
And then you can
so
remain.
it's paying a non-financial price.
Yes.
Essentially.
Correct.
Professor, where do you come down on this? You've studied both sides of the border for so long. You understand the nuances here. What do you think about the executive order and where we're headed with this?
First of all, I would think that, or trying to address this question, I think there are misconceptions and misperceptions of this issue. And with regards to immigration and the way that the phenomenon has been communicated to Texans, I think there are many things that have not been communicated properly. The executive order has to do with the fact that the Congress was an impasse. There was nothing going forward.
Correct.
And there's a problem. You cannot deport everybody. It's extremely costly for the American economy to do that. It's impossible to do that.
Right.
And we have recognized it since the beginning of this century.
Right.
And there are efforts by the Democrats and the Republicans, even together with John McCain and Edward Kennedy. They tried to come up with a comprehensive immigration reform bill. It's more political than anything. There's a need to arrange the dysfunctional immigration system. So what President Obama did was trying to give a solution, a temporary solution to a problem that cannot be solved because of an impasse in Congress.
And he in fact said, Professor, if I'm remembering this, that I'm going to do this executive order, and if you in Congress don't like it, you're perfectly able to come behind it, pass a law that would supersede it, and I understand you have the votes to pass whatever you want, peace.
Exactly.
That's pretty much what he did. Representative Lucio, what the professor says about the impact on the economy is, of course, true. If the people in our poll were to get their wish and we were to deport everybody who was here without status, it would have a significant impact on the economy of the state of Texas. Would it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think well, first of all, thank you for the invitation.
Well,
it's kind of neat to see this behind me.
Well, it's kind of nice to see you in front of it, so it's actually good.
I'm a big fan of the Tribune, and I've seen a lot of my colleagues get interviewed. I said, maybe one day, maybe one day he'll come
dreams
down
come
to South
true.
Texas.
What can I tell you?
Let me thank University of Texas, Brownsville, and UTRGV, and all my friends for allowing us to be here. But I don't think that the people are truly thinking through the economic impact that deporting 6% of our labor force in Texas would have on them on a daily basis and at home.
Right.
And so if you look at what Judge Hainan did, and Judge Hainan's a great man, I've known him a long time.
Yep.
He did not rule on the merits of the executive order. He ruled on the procedure of which the order was adopted.
Right. This is a legal matter.
It was a legal matter. So, when people are celebrating, oh, great, Obama's order there was a ruling against it. It wasn't a constitutional ruling against it. It was a procedural ruling against it. I'm just taken back by the fact that when it comes to productive students who we invest so much in their education, graduate, and such a small percentage of them actually want to continue their education. And if they get that education, they would be such productive members of our society. Why we want to hinder their ability to do that? Take, for example, we live along the border. We have some excellent, high-performing students who are undocumented. They are offered scholarships to go all over the country to school, especially since they're first-time Hispanic college students. They can't get past the checkpoint to go to those schools. They have to remain locally, and we have great alternatives to traveling away from school to get educated locally, but there's so many barriers to these students already. Now we want to make college 3 times as expensive for them.
You're referring in specifics to the in-state tuition question, right? Yeah.
And then those who are actually going to be productive, and we lay out a method for them to stay here through Obama's order.
Right.
We're letting politics get in the way of sensible policy.
Right. But Representative, you know the argument. I will come to in-state tuition in a little bit. Our poll had some interesting numbers on that as well today. But the argument there and the argument on a number of the issues you're talking about is we're creating incentives for what is considered to be illegal behavior. If we offer, for instance, in-state tuition to people who are here without status, even if they pass the conditions that your dad identifies over the course of a number of years, what you're doing is creating a magnet for people who are not here legally. That is the argument against.
And so what I will say to that is we've made it practically impossible for those that are here illegally to be here legally, to register and apply to be citizens.
Right.
Most cases require them to go to their country of origin and go through the application process that way. If you look at northern Mexico and you tell someone who has been here since they were 2 years old, some of them don't even speak Spanish, to say you're going to northern Mexico, of which is riddled with violence and gang activity, and you're going to have to wait there in hopes that you can apply for and gain access back into the country. That's impractical.
We need to reform the process.
We need to reform
the process needs to be reformed by them as well as us.
Right. So
presumably.
what you put forward first.
Right.
And I always say it this way. I understand that there's a system now that may have some problems.
Yeah.
But I'm a father of 2 children. And if something were to happen to the United States or Texas that created a very difficult environment for me to raise my kids, and the land of plenty was Canada, and I'm going there for the health and safety and prosperity of my family, a lot of those things that we're trying to say right now that these people can't be there for would not stop me.
Right.
It would be about...
You would do whatever it takes.
I would do whatever it takes.
Right. Let's talk about, let me stay with you, Representative, for 1 second on the border. So one big flashpoint in what is already the very beginnings, but we're into it, of a legislative session, is the decision of the House and the Senate in their base budgets to allocate dollars for border security. The House has put in just under $400 million. This is not a done deal yet, so these numbers may ultimately get closer or get to be bigger. The House has put about $400 million, a little bit less in for border security. The Senate, Chairman Lucio, has put in more than $800 million. Are we to take from that, Representative, that the House cares about border security only half as much as the Senate does? This is the loaded question portion of our program.
Yeah, defining border security is extremely important because I don't think it's quite yet thoroughly defined. And right now, the chambers seem to be playing chicken with each other with how much money they can throw at it. But you have to define it. Is border security bringing down displaced troopers for a week stint, of which they're just patrolling the highways?
Yes.
Or is border security investing in technology on the river, on the border, and cooperating with local law enforcement where there's known gang activity, criminal activity? Right now, it seems to be a politically popular thing to do, to say we're so behind border security, we're going to throw as much money at it.
Right.
But when you ask us down here, I don't feel like I live in an unsafe environment. I wouldn't raise my kids in an area I thought that was jeopardizing their safety. But would I like to see this area secured so that UTRGV can be prosperous, so that SpaceX and all the other wonderful things? Absolutely. Let's secure this wonderful gem of an area.
You don't think it's about just the amount of money. You think it's about the way the money is spent.
It has to be about the way the money is spent.
Senator Lucio, the fact is that Chairman Otto on the House side, Chair of Appropriations, believes that the Senate is spending money inefficiently. He thinks that the more conservative amount is what the House is proposing. And you have Democratic colleagues like Senator Watson who think that the amount the Senate is talking about is a waste of money. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think it's a waste of money. I think what the Senate did was to send a message back to the people of this state who believe that border security is, in fact, their #1 priority. And we wanted to ensure that we had a significant amount of money on the table to be able to choose, to use in whatever areas we needed. Now, I'm not going to say that the Senate is more compassionate, but I am going to say that the Senate probably feels that more money should be invested along the Texas border from Brownsville to El Paso for the purposes that have been defined during the last couple of years, especially the immigration surge that happened, crisis that happened this last summer. But I think that subcommittee that I'm a member of, and you're aware of that, within the military, the board, Veterans Affairs Committee,
Yes.
Will hopefully be given an opportunity to make recommendations
Right.
to the Finance Committee on how we can possibly use that money
Right.
effectively.
You know that Major Nichols and Colonel McCraw were testifying before the Senate a few weeks ago, and they allowed us how they thought that National Guard troops, who are typically deployed for a much shorter period, as your son says, were actually at risk of being there too long, and it was creating havoc for them, for their families, and their communities. Do you share any concerns about that?
I'm sorry.
The National Guard troops being deployed for too long along the border as part of this extended plan.
I personally support that effort. I agree that with Governor Patrick and Governor Abbott that having them to serve in the background to help our law enforcement agencies at the state, federal, and local levels will go a long ways to combating the drug infestation that is happening or that's coming across our borders.
So you're with
them.
So
I'm with them. Yeah. I'm with them on that. And I think the people of this community, if you really take a true poll, will agree that they feel safer by having that group here.
Mr. Mayor, you lead a city on the border. So tell me, in your community, is there support for continued deployment of the National Guard and the spending of the kinds of dollars that the Senator was talking about?
We're at the epicenter. Stark County has been the epicenter for Operation Strong Safety since it happened. We saw a big influx of movement of Central Americans. Yeah. We didn't have a lot of resources. We're a small town. We were overwhelmed. I will proudly say that having the DPS troopers there in my town, probably parked every 2.5 miles, having a National Guard have done a tremendous effort towards improving the situation as what we know as border security, but what they're for also is criminal activity. And I'm glad you asked me that question because I came prepared for that question. Yes. Let me give you some simple facts about what we have seen. And this is Rio Grande City snapshot, 2013, 2014. What it does for a community to create an environment of safety. National Guard, DPS having been there. 2013, chases in progress, we had 64. 2014, we have 38. Major accidents, we had 76. 2014, we have 57. Reckless driving, this is my favorite. Reckless driving, 199 for 2013, 80 for 2014. Criminal mischief, 171. 2014, 139. Terroristic threats, 125. And in 2014, only 84. The most impressive number I'll give you, January of 14, we confiscated within the city of Rio Grande 7,600 pounds of marijuana seized. In January 15, 695 pounds of marijuana seized. So I can give you practical numbers, but the sense that the Senator says about safety is absolutely true. It works. Boots on the ground works. Having them there gives everybody a great feeling of safety, but not only that, it makes communities safer too.
Professor, Professor, do you share Senator Lucio's, Chairman Lucio's sense that if you asked individuals in Brownsville whether they would support an extended deployment of the National Guard and the spending of more dollars rather than fewer dollars on this, that they would be with him, with Governor Patrick, with Governor Abbott?
Again, I think this has more to do with something more complicated that has to do with Representative Lucio's first question. Let's define border security and let's measure. Let's establish an objective. Yep. We have to secure the border. What is that? I mean, there's another fact that for me was very worrisome. In February 2013 report, the Congressional Research Service noted that there's no single quantitative off-the-shelf indicator that accurately and reliable provides a metric or score for border enforcement. You're throwing out money. What's your objective? Are you complying with your objective? DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety reports, it's saying that for the past 4 years that the border is insecure. You're throwing out money, multiplying your money, and you still have a problem. And you still cannot secure the border. Right. There are no metrics, and so then it's a matter of competency. Your authorities are not competent. That's why you're throwing out money and you still have your border insecure. That's for me worrisome. And there's no way to measure that. Right. And we have no definition of what's border security. So I think the question needs to go backwards. If people support that, it's because of how the media presents this issue.
Are you suggesting that different people who have different points of view about this are coming to the table with their own statistics to prove their point? Is that the problem?
Without rhetoric, without providing even
Without
statistics.
even providing statistics.
Exactly, that's right.
Right.
And the FBI and the Department of Public Safety at the federal level, they have provided data, specific data, that shows that border cities are more secure than other cities, in the country.
Right.
The border cities are more secure, and this is a trend that has been taking place in the past 7 years.
And so you take from that, Professor, that the crisis we've been hearing about may be overstated.
Well, probably yes. We have some statistics that show us that. What does apprehension means? I mean, sometimes the number is used to say there are more people trying to come. Sometimes more apprehensions mean more people trying to come. A problem of border security. More apprehensions, we're doing a better job with the money that we're given. It's utilized politically. We need better metrics, and we don't have the metrics.
Senator, you made an allusion to the federal government not doing its job on immigration reform, and that was one reason that Texas has to step up and do what it has been doing. Why is this so hard? The answer seems obvious on one level. This is a very politically charged issue. A lot of people come at it from different sides. But on the other hand, there does seem to be a drumbeat across the country for some kind of immigration reform. And yet Congress doesn't seem able to do, I mean, I understand the objections to what the president did, but why hasn't Congress done what it might have done up to this point but has failed to do? What do you think the obstacle is?
You know, I really go back to just saying what I said a few years ago. It just becomes a political issue for them. It's not a humanitarian issue, which it should be. The approach is just let's have a standoff, and in the process, you know, everybody's unhappy. You know, the polls show that we believe we have a do-nothing Congress in our country. They've had a chance to do a lot of things. I wish they would.
Let's be fair, both parties, by the way, both parties.
No, both parties.
Both parties.
I agree, both parties. No one can find middle ground right now. There's no consensus on anything they're doing, quite frankly. But I feel very strongly that the 4 border states, if we could be given the opportunity to address these issues ourselves at home base, and have the federal government respond financially to us, I think we could address these issues
rather than allowing the federal government to dictate the course for us.
Absolutely.
This sounds like health care. You want the money to come back and let you all fix the problem.
And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. I think there's a lot of sick people here, by the way, in Texas that need attention, and we're not getting our fair share back from the federal government to address those issues as well. We can go there if you want, but right now
we need a whole other hour, I think, to talk about health care. So
we're talking about international issues, and I feel that Congress has really failed. It's a broken system. They can't fix it, then they ought to allow us to fix it.
Right. Representative, I'm looking at the next 2 years, a little bit less than 2 years, of the president in office with a Republican Congress without a veto-proof majority. And I'm thinking we're going to see a whole lot of talk on issues like immigration, but probably not a whole lot of progress, simply because I understand how this works. Congress either does or doesn't pass something. The president either does or doesn't advocate for something. If something comes to the president's desk he doesn't like, he vetoes it, they can't override the veto. Should we all just go on vacation on this issue and every other issue for the next 2 years?
You know, I hope not. When the Civil Rights Act was adopted, it wasn't easy. And ultimately, its adoption was thought by many to change the South forever for that party. When you look at that, it's going to take tremendous political fortitude, and it, you know, probably in the end is going to hurt for the short time.
Right.
In the long run, people look back and thought, well, that makes perfect sense. Why wasn't that done sooner? What ultimately needs to happen is the silent majority needs to wake up and start advocating.
Silent majority. Who would be in the silent majority in this case, Representative?
I think a majority of folks who, when they're in the privacy of their own homes discussing policy, think of it in a very rational, reasonable way. Those that are outspoken are the ones we see in Austin.
Those people, the people in the silent majority don't speak up, and presumably they don't vote.
They don't vote.
So this would be the 67 or 68% of the people who make us the worst voter turnout state in the whole country.
That's correct.
Who do not turn out to vote.
That's correct.
Right.
Majority, and it's interesting because even the folks that I serve with who take votes, and I pull them aside and I said, do you know what you just voted on? Right. They said, yeah, but back home they'll kill me if I don't vote that way. Even though I agree with you, Lucio, I just can't do it.
But isn't that representative democracy? I mean, in some ways I kind of respect the people who are sent to do a job on behalf of the district, and they're at least doing it.
It's representative democracy if we had a significant number of people participating in representative democracy. But we have a small number of people.
The people they're representing are like that big.
Right.
Is that what it is?
Right. I mean, and it seems like we're creating barriers to participation. When I was a kid, I remember being told when I went to HEB by my father, one day, son, the way I'm swiping this card, we're going to be able to vote. It's going to be that easy. And it seems like we're creating more obstacles to voting, and instead of freeing it up online.
Let us accept you were probably giving your father an atypical kid, right? In terms of level of engagement. Do you think that immigration reform at the federal level has to be comprehensive? This is a sticking point, as you all know.
There's no way we'll get there.
We want to do comprehensive immigration reform, and the people who are now running Congress on both sides say, no, we actually have to do it piecemeal. Maybe we should do border security first, and then. Are you cool with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing right now. I'm working closely with Chairman Bonin on doing border security.
So at the state level, similar.
He assured to me that this is not an immigration bill, and if it becomes an immigration bill, we're going to have a problem, and we'll work to not pass what we need to pass if they try to attack it.
Right.
Anything done in such a large scale, I mean, it's tough.
Right.
It's tough.
Right.
And I think we should just take short, incremental bites at it to make progress.
Let the senator jump in, then we'll go to the chairman.
If I may, you know, I told you earlier before we started that I had filed a bill this morning about 10 o'clock. I filed Bill 838 to strengthen the Office of Immigration and Refugee Affairs and to have a better structure to address illegal entry into Texas and to better assist our local communities to cope with associated issues. In doing so, Kurt, we will be providing the governor with additional resources that will allow the state to learn from our experience from last summer. This is what it does. It requires the Office of Immigration and Refugee Affairs to work with the Secretary of State and statutorily designates the Secretary as the office's coordinator. It improves the effectiveness of the office by requiring it to apply for the maximum amount of federal funds for use in assisting state agencies, local governments, nonprofit organizations, and faith-based organizations in addressing immigration-related matters.
Right.
It maximizes the opportunity for Texas to receive federal assistance by requiring the office to seek reimbursement from the federal government for any cost incurred by state agencies, local governments, nonprofit organizations, and faith-based organizations in addressing immigrant-related matters. It also increases communication, cooperation, and collaboration efforts to prevent Texas from experiencing another humanitarian immigrant crisis by requiring the office to arrange meetings with appropriate local, state, and federal authorities and appropriate corresponding authorities in Mexico to establish initiatives and government-supported efforts that limit the entrance of undocumented immigrants.
So you're trying to get out. You're trying to get out ahead of this, even if the federal government won't do it. You're trying to get out ahead of it.
But you know, I think that we need to obviously create this governor's advisory committee on immigration and refugees to be able to have a good resource to go to when we address policy.
Well, and let me come to the professor on this, because you're at work right now on a book about security strategy in Mexico. You understand both sides of this. If, in fact, to Representative Lucio's point, we disaggregate these pieces and border security comes first, that is theoretically something can happen, but it's a two-sided issue, isn't it?
That is correct.
There's a Mexico side, to Chairman Lucio's point, and there's a U.S. side.
Yes, there's a U.S. side. There was an attempt to pass something called immigration agreement when Mexico was involved and sitting on the table.
Yes.
At some point after 2001, September 11 changed the things. But the necessity of comprehensive immigration reform, just on this side of the border, is needed. And it was recognized by Republicans and Democrats. I'm completely for. Yeah. And Democrats and Republicans are for. This has been a political issue. This discussion has become political. But just today, I read how Senator Marco Rubio and a possible candidate of the Republican Party, Jeb Bush, was saying that they were talking about comprehensive immigration reform. So there's a necessity that has been recognized before, much before even September 11th. The immigration system in this country is dysfunctional, and we have seen that. We have to deal with security, but also with the people that are already here. We need to be serious and to address issues in their own way, but they need to be addressed at the same time, because if not, we're going to have emergency situations like the one that we lived in the past summer. Because there's some legislation that, I mean, organized crime probably and some mafias took advantage of a hole in legislation, and they took advantage and they tried to bring kids. But the unaccompanied children are not a matter of security, and that was, politicians took it like that and sent the National Guard because of a problem that had to do with children. And the discourse has been distorted, and the misinformation.
Well, but of course, the byproduct of much of what you're talking about, that period of time, actually has resulted in the numbers that the mayor, and at least in his community, the mayor is citing what sound to me like pretty conclusive results, or at least he would say were conclusive results, that the approach we've taken has succeeded.
But crime is not necessarily related to undocumented immigration.
So you think those numbers may actually be about a lot of different things?
Exactly.
Not just
immigrants do not only commit crime. I mean, immigrants come to work.
Do you know for a fact that all those fewer car crashes and what have you that you mentioned, that's all related to immigration? Do you know that for a fact?
It's all related to having extra DPS and extra National Guard, extra law enforcement, extra border security that we cannot as small communities. Now keep in mind that when you talk about immigration, it's about saving lives. And if we can save lives and have a good policy, have a good structure within government at the Congress level, because Congress has to make these laws, you're saving lives. Just this morning, I also read that across my community in Rio Grande City, Camargo, they found 3 people that had drowned. One was a Salvadorian, 2 were Mexican nationals, and they keep on wanting to come across because they do want the land of milk and honey. What they don't know that we have to create a front door approach to the milk and honey, not a back door approach.
So you and Representative Lucio are actually together on this, that maybe the process needs reform on the front end.
I think that the process as a whole needs to be completely reformed. We need an immigration policy that's made by Congress. That way it has the strength of law.
Creates access.
And even if it's done piecemeal, but make it in one piece of legislation where you don't have to be waiting and guessing to see what the next cycle of politics was going to look like. Ronald Reagan did it during the 80s.
Right. But you remember George W. Bush tried to do it and was unable to do it, and that was, a Republican president attempting to do it who was thwarted by his own party from the right on that. I mean, it is a hard thing, you acknowledge, it's a hard thing to do regardless of the president's party.
The president, when he came in 2008, made a promise that he was going to pass immigration. He reneged on that promise.
He did promise that.
He did promise. He reneged. This is not an issue, Mr. Smith, that's blue or red. It's red, white, and blue. It's about the good old US of A and people wanting to come here.
Right.
And again, I remind people that it's about saving lives. And you have Sister Norma here in Pimentel that did a wonderful job bringing in the Salvadorians and the people from Honduras when they came, and she gave them care and she gave them comfort. But at the same time, her and I talked months ago during the summer. We talked about border security and the need to create a secure environment for our communities that also, in a funny sort of way, has a byproduct of creating a safer environment for the immigrants who are taken advantage of by the coyotes coming across the river.
And regardless of politics, that's an issue that you guys can come together on.
Yes, sir.
Right. Representative, you brought up in-state tuition. It is a hot button, to say the least, and is likely to be a hotter button, in fact, during this legislative session. Our poll this morning showed that the state is divided on whether or not to retain in-state tuition for undocumented immigrants. 43% against current law, which would provide that in-state tuition. 42% favor keeping it. By party, about 3/4 of Republicans believe we should get rid of in-state tuition for undocumented students, and about 2/3 of Democrats believe we should keep it. This is, in some ways, a microcosm of the discussion we're having. How do we get through this with the state and the state's citizens not at war over this? Because it does seem like the kind of issue that is likely to divide us all.
It's interesting. We live in a really good country, in a great state, where this is the issue that we're so divided on, as opposed to being able to participate in our democracy or eat or have security, being able to walk to school.
Right.
Other countries have significantly more pressing issues. So the fact that we're arguing about whether or not we should let children go to school, college, and at what price is a blessing. Let me say that. Number two, it goes back to if we back out of this politically and just think of it from an economic standpoint.
Yep.
We invest so much in their high school, junior high, elementary school education. We have a problem now with getting kids to go to college, period.
Yeah.
Graduation rates, dropout rates. We're talking about a small group of kids who are driven enough, first-time college-going kids, to go to college, and now we want to put it beyond their reach. If it's an issue of fairness, then make it we already have a growing crisis with college affordability.
Yeah.
Try to make it as affordable for everyone, not just, you know, undocumented students, but, you know, out-of-state tuition applicants are the ones that I think we're comparing them against. Why should someone who is here undocumented pay in-state tuition when the person who's here legally from Oklahoma who wants to go to UT has to pay 3 times the amount? I'm for making it fair for everyone.
So you, and affordable for everyone. Would you join Governor Patrick, who suggested to me a couple weeks ago that maybe the issue is we got to get rid of out-of-state tuition completely? I'm sure all the university people here just had heart attacks over the thought of this. But Governor Patrick, I asked Governor Patrick that very question. He posed it a little differently. He said, why should an undocumented student get access to in-state tuition when a kid from Oklahoma, possibly whose parents served our country in the military, he raised it, has to pay out-of-state tuition? Well, and he said, well, maybe we ought to just get rid of out-of-state tuition completely, he said.
I'm for that if we fully fund Texas grants. How about that?
Or fully fund Texas grants. Senator, you know Governor Patrick as well as anybody up on this stage. Why is he wrong on this and your son is right? Or are you going to pick him over your son?
Boom.
Yes, hashtag boom. That's right. Somebody tweet that. Go ahead.
Right now, I love them both equally, I guess.
Equally. You're getting a raw deal here, Representative. Equally.
He carries my bills in the
I think he just adopted Governor Patrick. Okay, go ahead.
You know, we got to use our faith in some of our decision making. We live in a country and we pledge allegiance to our flag, a country under God, a state under God. We have right over the president's podium, in God we trust. And yet, you know, our decisions don't come anywhere close to addressing them with the compassion that we should. Love our neighbor? I guess not. When those that don't agree with some of us who feel that a child was brought here at no fault of their own, have grown up here, as I mentioned earlier, has pledged allegiance to our flag, has gone through the process. Now they find themselves in college, ready to graduate and go out and be contributing citizens of this community if they're allowed to do so. So why not? We've already discussed the economics of it. You know, I want to make it clear to everyone here, I'm not for illegal entry to our country. When we travel, you and I, into Mexico, we need our paperwork, and we stop every so often to be able to get through into the interior. I understand that, and it should work the same way. But for those that are coming to our border, they're coming here as refugees, most of them. They're coming here because they have nothing to look forward to in a country that doesn't protect their rights or give them any kind of hope for the future for them and their families. So we have to be compassionate at one point, because you and I are just passing through. That's what I tell my colleagues. We're passing through, and we're here, and we pray every day that we do the right thing, and most of us the Christian thing, and yet we're not doing it. We turn our backs on doing the right thing for these young people.
So when that bill comes up, as it will, as you know it will, because we can both count, and we know that the votes are there to bring up that bill, when that bill comes up to overturn in-state tuition, you will vote no.
I will be standing up and speaking my piece, I guarantee.
But will you vote no, Senator? Will you vote no if they attempt to overturn in-state tuition? Will you vote no?
At this point, I don't think I can support any bill or any action that will not give those that are here who are part of the Dreamers, or those that want to come to study here, whether I would vote not to allow that happen. I do support, though, the opportunity to give those folks here in our state an opportunity to be part of the system. For example, and I have to say this, about 10 years ago, I couldn't help my own nephew get into Texas A&M with a 3.8 grade point average, 3.8 into vet school, okay? And I was pretty angry because they were taking students from other states and making them part of the A&M system. But he had graduated from Texas A&M 4 years in a row, and I couldn't get him in to vet school just on a recommendation.
Yep.
Didn't flex my muscle, didn't make a big thing to do. I could have, but I didn't, because I think the young man should have been given that
So you
opportunity.
think we need more access generally?
Absolutely,
these schools?
we need more access to them.
Let me go to the mayor and the professor, then I have one last question for Senator Lucio, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. Mr. Mayor, can you be comfortable with keeping the current law in place and allowing undocumented students to get access to in-state tuition?
Anybody who's talked to immigrants before, whether they're new to the country or they're undocumented, they want two basic things, and I'll say the components, and I think a lot of people in this room who are from the Valley will understand. They want an education, they want a job.
Yep.
The only way we can get this young population and give them the best chance to succeed is to give them a chance for an education.
That's the first step.
That's the first step.
Yeah.
That's the most critical step. Again, I'm talking about foundations that last generations.
Right.
So if Governor Perry, a long time ago, a decade ago, whatever it was, saw the wisdom of giving these dreamers or giving these young minds an opportunity to succeed, I support that idea then. I support that idea now, because I know that only way that we can open doors for immigrants or for any of our kids is through education.
Right.
So we don't shut down the door, we open it up.
And in fact, Governor Perry sacrificed his presidential campaign arguably on that issue in that debate where he was booed, but stuck to his guns, and I believe is still sticking to the same position
I
today.
stand with Perry on that.
Right. You're an educator, professor. You understand the impact of this from the classroom perspective. I'm going to just take a wild guess and say that you're for keeping the current law in place.
Yes, of course. But first of all, I would like to ask, I would like to go back to why these people are here, why these kids are here, why they got education since the elementary school. Because their parents came here to work and there was somebody who gave them a job. I mean, if you want to solve this problem, don't give these people a job. These kids are here, and they come because because they are expecting a job that might be given to them. So they have been educated in the economic standpoint. I'm an economist. You need people that are educated. You cannot deport them. As I said, it's very costly. It's impossible to deport them. So if you have a more educated society, not for the compassion. I mean, I'm not talking about compassion. These people are needed in this country.
This is a pragmatic decision.
Exactly. It's a pragmatic thing. I'm not about talking about compassion. People are given a job. I mean, who's doing your yard? Who's picking up fruit? These people are needed here. So I think that if you have these kids with more education, this is going to be better for the state and for the country.
Ultimately for the economic development.
That's right.
Let me ask the senator one question, and then we have a microphone. We're going to walk around one or two that will, if you'll raise your hand, we'll be happy to call on you. Please, what I'll say as you prepare your questions, questions, not speeches. We want to get as many people in as we possibly can. If you would, please. Senator, I want to ask you about Judge Cascos, soon-to-be Secretary of State Cascos, who you know very well, who was put up by Greg Abbott as his first act as governor, as the appointee for Secretary of State. We have been very careful here in talking about immigration policy and immigrants to use the word undocumented, because that is the word that, at least at the Tribune, our little style book internally, we say undocumented, we say without status, we don't say illegal. Judge Cascos went before the Senate Nominations Committee to testify when he was being considered as Secretary of State, and he used the word undocumented. And Senator Birdwell, your colleague, the chairman of the Nominations Committee, upbraided him, that would be the word I'd use, for using the word undocumented. He said, it's illegal, it's not undocumented. And he made the point that if he carried a handgun without a concealed handgun license, it would not be an undocumented gun, it would be an illegal gun. So he instructed the new Secretary of State to use the word illegal and not undocumented. Help decide the dispute for us, because I want to understand, sitting in Austin as I do, not on the border, what is the proper way to frame this issue, undocumented or illegal?
Well, I think as we look at federal law, anyone coming into our country without proper documentation obviously entered the country illegally. However, we address, for years now, we've addressed those in that category as undocumented. And I prefer the undocumented because it really tells us that that person is not here legally.
Right.
So you don't have to.
Is there anything
You
pejorative,
don't
is there
have
anything
to
negative or nasty about
snap-
saying illegal? Can you say illegal and not have it be perceived as a negative or a nasty thing? I mean, it's a fact, right?
Well, I've even used the word illegal aliens,
Yeah.
you know, in some, but you know, that's yesterday.
Are you comfortable, Representative, with
I'm
illegal?
not comfortable with
Yeah.
it anymore.
Here's how I see it. I mean, we're talking about human beings, right?
Yeah.
Guns are guns. Human beings have a heartbeat. And when you're trying to encourage that person that came here at 6 months to be a great person and hopefully one day a great American
And a
do
productive
good in
citi-
school.
productive citizen.
And his whole life, he has been labeled as illegal. And he goes to school with that mentality.
Right.
What is his confidence going to be? And we were talking about people, human beings. You know, we're going and spending billions of dollars to secure regions all over the world.
Yep.
And be humanitarian in other areas. But in our own home country, with our neighbor to the south, it is not politically acceptable. I don't understand that. And so, yes, let's talk about them as human beings. And let's use the word undocumented.
Let's,
There you go, son.
we could spend 3 hours talking about this up here, but I'd rather include all of you in the conversation. You'll have better questions than I will anyway. So let's go ahead and ask you to please raise your hands. We'll have questions from the audience. Start there. We're going to come to you, Mr. Surfy, in the front, I promise. Yes, sir.
My question is, what do you tell a young boy, U.S. citizen, fifth grader, 6 years of perfect attendance, straight A's, and he cannot go to McDonald's because his mom doesn't have a driver's license.
Yeah.
He cannot go to McDonald's because his mom does not have a driver's license, even though he got straight A's, perfect attendance for 5 years.
Right. This is
And
obviously
he's a
one
US
of,
citizen.
right, one of many anecdotes that we would hear of people who have done everything
What
by
do
the
we tell
book.
that boy?
What do you tell this boy, Senator?
I want to reiterate, I mean, I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, he's saying, the question was, what do you tell a kid, fifth grader, who's had perfect attendance in school, perfect grades, but can't go to McDonald's because his mother doesn't have a driver's license?
Because she's
Because she's undocumented. What do you do about that? How do you square a situation like that?
You know, it's a hard one. I think our counselors, our teachers, our parents, their parents, everyone should come together and try to foster a relationship that will send a good message to that child that we care for him, and that we're going to do everything we can
Right.
to see that he's part of the family, Texas family down the road. That's why when I said a while ago I support President Obama's position on those that are here, it's part of a humanitarian issue that I really want us to solve in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that. You know, in Washington, unfortunately, the government is not making the decisions they should be making for those that have been here for a long period of time, who have contributed in one way or another, who have their kids in school, like this fifth grader, who has been there every day,
Yep.
learning the English language, learning American history, and trying to be a good student.
Representative,
Can
go.
I add something to that? What do you tell the 10th grader who came here when he was 6 months old, who is a straight A student, who is invited to Austin to compete in an academic UIL event, who can't get past the checkpoint? But study hard, graduate top of your
Yeah.
class,
Yeah.
but you cannot go past Sarita.
Let me actually take, I think of everything in terms of public policy. This is my curse. So let me actually take the questioner's point and advance it a notch. And that is, we have a discussion in this state occasionally about whether we should be providing driver's licenses or ID cards to undocumented persons. So could you provide, and should the legislature vote to provide driver's licenses to people who are undocumented, Representative?
Well, that's essentially what Obama's order does under certain circumstances.
Right.
It provides them with a social security number,
Right.
A working permit, and a driver's license so that they can come into the fold.
So
and
your
be
answer is
productive.
yes, we should be doing
Yes.
this? Right.
Yes.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Serafy, right here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, let me get back to the term undocumented. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it more specific? Because if I surpass the speed limit, I'm doing something illegal. And even if a documented person surpasses the speed limit, they're doing something illegal. So there's a broad spectrum
Yes.
of things that can make an individual illegal. undocumented is much more, well, it is more politically correct, but it is also much more specific. Right. I wish Judge Koskos would have asked me for the response, but isn't that, am I correct?
Well, and in fact, Representative, well, let me let the professor go. Mr. Cervi is absolutely correct that one of the if not the criticism of undocumented or some other phrase other than illegal is that it's simply bowing to political correctness, right? That is one criticism of that. You would say what?
I would say just very recently the term illegal or undocumented has been, put aside, and now we have been using the term unauthorized. But at the same time, who's giving jobs to them are doing something illegal. So who's illegal? Only the migrant or also the employer? I mean, that's another thing.
That's what I'm saying. Undocumented is much more specific because that does define the situation, because we can all become illegal in one fashion or another.
Right.
In that respect, Senator Birdwell is correct, right? If you carry a handgun without a license, you're committing an illegal act. Right,
but if you're referring to an individual who is undocumented, you know specifically what you're talking about. Right.
Yeah, right. And I think it's about political correctness, but at the same time, we need to address these issues. I mean, in different terms, depending on what the conversation is about. And the unauthorized migrants that's used right now instead of illegal or undocumented has to do with they are not authorized to come in order to avoid the political incorrectness of the term. So
let me go. You have one right there. Let's take one right there. Thank you.
That's very interesting. You mentioned about all the rights for undocumented aliens are getting driver's license. They can attend school.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sir.
All these rights about undocumented aliens, they can get driver's license, attend school, and have all kinds of benefits. Well, I noticed if you're an undocumented alien in countries south of the border like Mexico, you have no rights. To get a driver's license in Mexico, you have to have a Mexican birth certificate, or even a cash check in a bank. You have to have a federal voter registration card, and to get that, you have to be a Mexican citizen. So I see two things that should be done. Demand these other countries to have full reciprocity. If they're going to take in the whole world, the United States, let Americans go to other countries and have the same benefits, or follow the example of Mexico's Instituto Nacional de Migración and strictly enforce immigration laws already in fact. I see what I do in Mexico, and I can't even go to Maquiladora unless I show a work permit.
All right, let me ask Representative Lucio about that. So there is a question of how Mexico treats people and treats our citizens, treats their citizens. This is a two-sided issue. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, think about the 1944 Water Treaty. I try to always put that in whatever context I'm talking about.
Right, yes.
So, yes, we send as much, we do send aid to Mexico, and whether or not that is reciprocated, but that takes tremendous relationship building effort on behalf of our two nations and on behalf of the state of Texas.
Right.
I don't recall a large amount of times Governor Perry went to Mexico City to build that relationship. I am trying to encourage. We have a fresh start. We have a whole new set of statewide elected leaders.
Right.
One of which is fluent in Spanish, my friend George P. Bush, who have an opportunity now to go to say, we have a fresh start in Texas. We want to build this relationship with you. And it could go a long way to solve some of these international border issues. In Mexico, a lot of what gets done at the government level is based on relationships.
Yep.
So we do have to...
We have some work to do on that.
We have some work to do.
Okay. Let me take another one. Back in the back. Yes? Could you stand so we can hear you a little bit better? I'm sorry.
Well, I often hear these kinds of debates online, on TV, and other media, but I often see that there are lots of points missing from the whole immigration debate. For example, the fact that more than half of our new immigrants, or at least illegal immigrants, are from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and nobody's addressing those. And the fact that illegal immigrants here in the US contribute over $28 billion in taxes.
Okay.
And, well, I just see a lot of points missing. Why aren't those facts brought up more often?
Right. That's an interesting, Senator Lucio, that's an interesting point. We talk about illegal immigration, we talk about immigration policy in a very narrow context. It often relates to our southern border, it often relates specifically to Mexico, when in fact we saw last summer with all the children crossing that in fact the origin of a lot of people who cross over is in fact not Mexico. Many people in this country were surprised to discover that the problem was more complex than what they had heard or believed or been told.
If you go out to Baytown or Bay City,
Right.
not Bay City, but out here, Bayview, excuse me. If you go out to Bayview, you'll find that a lot of those that are being detained there are from Russia, from other European countries. It's just not Mexico,
Right.
Central and South America.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's not just a Mexican or a Mexico issue. It really isn't.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
We're very aware that comes from other countries. In Rio Grande City, about 2 years ago, we had 2 Chinese nationals in somebody's backyard. And that created quite a bit of chaos because it opened our eyes to the fact that, yes, immigration is a global issue and people want to come in. It's not just Mexico or Honduras or El Salvador.
Yes.
It's completely global. And most recently, there was talk of a Mideastern that was detained somewhere along this corridor. So I don't know, where he was from. But the fact of the matter is that it's, we used undocumented in a manner of public discourse, like right now we're discussing, and it feels good and it sounds appropriate. And what you do in your homes, if you call them illegal, it's okay, because the fact of the matter is we're a nation of laws, and the law was broken, and it's okay. It's nothing bad about that either. I don't see either one being totally good or totally bad.
What about the point that the questioner made that the economic contributions of people who've come here from other countries is actually significant? Instead of the flip side of, if we deport everybody, ag and other industries will collapse by virtue of the loss of the workforce. The positive contribution that the questioner is making, I don't know that his numbers are exactly right, but I'm going to assume that they're close. That's something that is not often discussed as part of this conversation.
The immigrant that we know is productive. You go back, and I think they use Chinese immigrants to build the railroad. They use different type of immigrants to build different infrastructures in this country. And what you see a lot in the immigration population, if it's a Latino, they work hard in construction, they work hard in home building, they work hard in concrete work. The culture itself, and I'm very proud to say that our culture is a very hard-working culture. Anywhere you go in this country, you'll see them hard at work. And I think that work ethic goes back to the simple fact of what I said earlier. They want a job, because in Mexico, they make $8 to $10 a week, or maybe a little bit more by now. And here you make $10 an hour. And that, $8 to $10 an hour, that's a very tempting thing. That's what they want. They want to have a job, and they want education for their kids, I believe.
Julie, can I take one more? Where did you go? Can I take one more? You're telling me I got to wrap it? I'm sorry. I wish we had much more time to do this. There's absolutely tons we could still be talking about. I want to thank our panelists. Please join me in doing that, for being here. Let's also thank the University of Texas at Brownsville and our sponsors again for being here, making it possible for us to be here. And thanks to all of you. We'd love to come back. President Bailey, have us back, please. Thanks again. Come again. We'll see you. All right. Senator, I really enjoyed it.